Hey, welcome back to Atypical Talk. This is a podcast where we have conversations that illuminate the intersection of faith, culture, and the common spaces of our humanity. I'm Abby.
I'm Allison.
And I'm Joel.
And our first question today is, what movie have you seen recently that you would recommend and why? It doesn't have to be one you saw in theaters. It could be an old movie you found on Netflix. But Joel, what is your answer?
Oh man, I just this last weekend saw Oppenheimer, which is the new Christopher Nolan joint, who's I think one of the greatest visionary directors and writers of our time. He's done like Inception, Interstellar, Batman Begins, Dark Knight trilogy, just a really incredible storyteller. And this was a story about Oppenheimer, who was the father of the atomic bomb. And I was so excited for this movie. I had it circled on my calendar for like a year. And I had to do the hard work of like not Wikipediaing his story because I didn't know where it went, what else happened. All I knew is he was behind the bomb. And it did not disappoint. It was really incredible. It was 3 hours long, but I was like on the edge of my seat for a long period of time and didn't feel like it was crazy long. Really incredible story and left me like with so many questions and thoughts. And I've been doing deep dives now on him and the decision to create the bomb and drop the bomb and all the moral dilemma inside of that. I mean, it's just a fascinating story.
So did you do the Barbie double feature?
I didn't do Barbenheimer. Barbenheimer did not happen because we went to a late showing. It was three hours long.
That was a missed opportunity.
I know.
I don't know. I haven't seen Barbie
Barbenheimer.
either. But
I could have Barbenheimered and been so cool, but I did not. But a really incredible story. I would also say, just to cheat on the question, what I've been watching over the last month is I've gone back and I've watched, this is a TV show, so this is cheating, but I've watched the HBO classic The Wire, and I'm on season 4 out of 5. And I've had people tell me about this show for like ever, and I just never did it. And it is just incredible. It's about inner city Baltimore and the collision between the drug war and police officers and the justice system and politicians. And oh my gosh, I am like riveted by these stories. And it's really like helping me see things not so black and white, but very gray. And the characters are incredible and surprising. And it's amazing. So very adult show, very rough around the edges to say the least. But man, it's an incredible story. And I think God's using it in my life to shape certain things in my head and heart in awesome ways. But that's what I've been doing.
I have not been so deep. I took a little girl that I helped mentor to go see the new Little Mermaid remake a couple of months ago. It was really good. Like, I would say go see it. Some people I know are against like remaking Disney classics or whatever, but it was actually really good. And then my husband actually reminded me today that we went and saw Guardians of the Galaxy 3, which I had actually forgotten about.
Yeah.
That feels like forever ago.
We don't go to the movies, so like it's everything I see is going to be old pretty much. But
it's amazing. Yeah.
You know, and if we're talking about Netflix series or whatever, like this is also not deep, but The Summer I Turned Pretty has second series out, 4 episodes, and you know. It's a chick flick, teeny bopper kind of show, but I love it.
Love that.
What about you?
My husband and I, we went and watched Oppenheimer last night as well, and I thought it was really good. The only problem was we were stuck in the front section because all the other seats were booked, so we were in the very back of the front section, but we're like, it's fine. It says that there's reclining seats at this theater. We get there, they are absolutely not reclining seats. Can't even budge back an inch. And so I had to strain my neck the whole time, but I thought it was such a good movie. I love Christopher Nolan, but I'm not huge into like historical war era movies, and so I wasn't sure what I was getting into, but I thought the cinematography was incredible, and just the new way that they told this story, and like the guilt of the people behind who built this bomb. Like, it was so good. Such a good movie.
Talk about gray, right?
Yeah,
like to where they're like, there was just this moral dilemma of, hey, we know the Nazis are making this weapon. We don't know if we should, but we know that they're doing it. So they felt like they had to do something in the moral fallout afterwards. I mean, it's fascinating the way they told that story. It was amazing. But I also think that I'm going to end up having to pay for some kind of therapy for Abby after she had to crane her neck for 3 hours.
Yes.
And that close to those
massage,
nuclear
maybe.
explosions and things like that. Oh my gosh, that's wild.
But we got AMC A-List to go watch this, so we are planning our next few movies just so we can get our money's worth. Yes. So Barbie, Indiana Jones, all of that is coming up in the next few weeks.
That's fun.
Our first topic today is a CNBC article titled Actors Union Joins Writers on Strike, Shutting Down Hollywood. The Writers Guild of America, which has been on strike since May, is seeking higher compensation and residuals, particularly when it comes to streaming shows, as well as new rules that will require studios to staff television shows with a certain number of writers for a specific period. The Guild also is seeking compensation throughout the process of pre-production, production, and post-production. Currently, writers are often expected to provide revisions or craft new material without being paid. Actors in Hollywood have now joined the strike. The Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers has said in a statement that they tried to work with the actors by offering increased pay, health benefits, and a groundbreaking AI proposal that protects actors' digital likenesses. Duncan Crabtree Ireland, National Executive Director of SAG-AFTRA, said, in that groundbreaking AI proposal, they propose that our background performers should be able to be scanned, get paid for one day's pay, and their company should own that scan, their image, their likeness, and should be able to use it for the rest of eternity in any project they want with no consent and no compensation. This has been the first tandem strike in the industry since 1960. The strike has essentially shut down Hollywood. Bob Iger, Disney CEO, noted that the industry has not completely recovered from the coronavirus pandemic, and these strikes come at the worst time in the world. So what do you guys think about this strike? Like, did you guys know this was happening since May?
I had heard about it happening, but I guess because new movies were being released and all sorts of stuff, like, you don't think about it that much. Like, oh, they're actually not working because all these things are still hitting the big screen, you know?
It's just now in like 6 months from now, there's going to be no movies.
Yes.
That's really, you know what I mean? That's a weird thing to think about, but we're going to be affected by this later.
Yeah. And, you know, I think sometimes when we hear these things, we think about the like A-list actors and actresses not working, and we're like, okay, they're fine. Like they probably have, you know, a bank load of money just for this kind of occasion. But, you know, what hurts my heart thinking about it are the like lighting guys or the camera guys who aren't working, who probably, you know, potentially live paycheck to paycheck like a lot of Americans. And so it's just, that's where for me, you know, the tension comes in, is like we talked about earlier, we don't go see a lot of movies. So if no more movies came out this year, like, okay, like it's probably not going to change my life, you know, at all, but it's for sure these, you know, background kind of behind the scenes employees changing their life for certain.
Yeah, it's a whole industry. It's not just the cast of 30 people you see inside a movie. This is an entire industry with tons of supporting players behind the cameras and to build the sets, and, you know, industries like craft services that bring food and coffee onto the sets. Like all these things are shut down. I mean, I liken it to during coronavirus. Man, who says coronavirus anymore? That's crazy. I just said that. I'm like, I haven't called it that forever. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, like you remember back when like they canceled like the NBA season and they did everything in the bubble, and the NFL had that weird year to where only like family members could be in these stadiums. And you're like, oh, that didn't just, it's not just affecting those guys or TV, it's affecting the restaurants and all the people working at the stadiums that didn't have jobs. And so it's always helpful, I think, to take a look back to think about the people on the outside and how it's affecting the people on the margins in that way. And it just seems to me that there's been a massive shift in the way that people consume stories and media, TV and movies, and the industry really didn't shift along with it, with their paying practices and how people were being compensated. And it's just so different than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And to me, and again, as being a novice in this entire understanding of this, it just feels like, well, this is probably a course correction that they need to do to take care of people that are working in this that are not just at the very top of the food chain, that are still getting their massive pay. So I hope that it's a helpful thing to course correct, and they can come to some kind of agreement where nobody wins 100%, but everybody gets a couple steps forwards, and there's compromise. Compromise is not a dirty word in these situations. And but yeah, I mean, it's crazy that it has been going on for so long, because we mentioned, it hasn't really affected the things that we view yet. But taking a step back, just from, this is something I'm trying to do, like not just looking at it and how this affects me in this moment, but asking questions about who else, where else, where are the other layers of things and perspectives should we look at? And yeah, it's a crazy thing to think about how this is going to shape the next year or more. And they still have not come to an agreement as we are recording this now, with actors and writers on the sidelines. Like even the premieres for like Oppenheimer and Barbie were like cut short because all the actors went home. And I do think it's kind of a cool thing how actors and writers, there's not this kind of fight between them and conflict between them. They're on the same page, and I think it's been cool seeing some of like my favorite actors talk glowingly about the writers and how they couldn't do anything without the writers, and understanding that this relationship and the creative work, that they need each other to make it happen. So I think that's awesome. I
did see another CBS News article that there was a guy, Billy Biggers, I think it says, who owns a family owned like prop shop in Georgia, and he said that, you know, they're typically bustling with activity and it's eerily quiet. He said the company usually rents props to 30 productions annually, but currently no items are being dispatched and revenue streams have ceased. And, you know, so you think like this isn't even a California issue or a Hollywood issue. Like this is people all over who, you know, provide different services to these movies or shows in Hollywood. So yeah, it's definitely, like you said, there's lots of layers to how this is going to impact the rest of us too.
Yeah, And I have seen a lot of people saying, you know, I don't get why these A-list actors are out here. They're millionaires. They're not being affected by this. But it's like, yeah, they're friends and
solidarity.
Other people
once,
one
long time ago.
Yeah,
we think,
And so this is like affecting people that, you know, you grew up watching and stuff that aren't, you know, getting the money that they made, you know, when they first did that movie.
Yeah, and I think for me too, like taking another step back and just thinking from a perspective of Christian faith and following Jesus, like what do we think, and what is the proper way to respond when there is a strike or when you're sort of stopping work so that you can, you know, voice something to move the ball down the field to make progress. And I know I've heard some people before just rip some Bible verses about like, well, you need to just respect authority and submit to your authority and just do the job that you have in front of you. And yes, those dynamics are in the scriptures. I would argue that we're really ripping them out of their context and stories of what they were saying at that time, and the purpose that specifically Paul said to do that with, and that's a great conversation for another time. But I think it's really fascinating to think about the reality that the God of the Bible is a God of justice. And when we hear justice, I think we think of punishment for a crime, and they got justice, but the type of justice that is littered throughout the pages of the Bible in Old and New Testament, 2,000 different references towards, is this idea of restorative justice, where the vulnerable are picked up and where things are on equal footing, especially for those who are lagging behind, who don't have enough, who have been kicked to the curb and pushed to the margins. Like, God is so concerned with those people that he stands for them and he moves on their behalf, and he calls the people that claim to follow him to do that as well. And so a couple questions I think it's important for us to ask whenever there's a strike of any sorts. And hey, we live in a union town. These kind of things happen here. But I think questions for followers of Jesus to ask, a couple of them are this, like, what's the desired outcome of the action? Are we just concerned with ourselves and our comfort and getting what we want? Is that really the desired outcome of the action? Or are we thinking about others? Are we thinking about the whole? Or are we just thinking about me? I think that's a great question to ask. Another great question to ask is, will this proposed action that we're fighting for and striking for, will it cause harm to vulnerable people? Is there a possibility that what we're doing is actually going to cause more harm to vulnerable people? Or is it really holding the case of the most vulnerable people around us? I think these are great questions to ask because, again, they put us and our possible selfish desires out of the driver's seat to the back seat, maybe the curb. Then the third is, will this action impede or harm my witness as a follower of Jesus? Will people think more negatively about Jesus because of my action, or will they think more positively about Jesus and my action? And I think inside of that, it's really the way that you hold your position. You can be on a picket line and represent Jesus well, and you can be on a picket line cursing and talking terribly about people in personal manners and not representing Jesus well. And so the way that you engage in these kind of things matter as well, because there are people watching and you have an opportunity to show people, represent what Jesus is like. And I think those are the more important things for us to consider when we think about strikes and worker picketing and all those kind of things as well. But all of it really centered on the reality that we've got to think beyond ourselves and just what we want and our comfort, because God is calling us to do so much more than that and be better than that. And that's when some good stuff takes place. Pastor and author Andy Stanley, I know we've quoted this before on the podcast, but it always comes to my mind, is that Christians always look more like Jesus when we're fighting for other people's rights than clinging and white-knuckling our own. We always look more like Jesus. The story of grace is more attractive when, instead of us white-knuckling our own rights, we're fighting for the rights of others. And so I think that's a good thing for us to consider.
So what is the worst travel experience you've ever had?
Immediately what came to my mind was it was right before we had kids. We knew that we were going to be starting a family pretty soon. And so my wife and I, we booked a trip. It was the first time we'd done like an all-inclusive resort in Mexico. And we had booked a trip in February. The weather was terrible in Indiana. It was going to be awesome. It was kind of our last hurrah before we started a family. And it was like a 6 a.m. flight. Actually, it was 5:45 and out of Indianapolis. So we got up crazy early, got all the way down to the airport. We get to the desk to check our bags, and they tell us, oh, this flight is, your flight's canceled today. There was an issue with the plane. I'm like, oh, wait, but today is like, we were going to get there so early. It was going to be a day at the resort that we paid for. And I'm like, gosh, what else can we do? And then we had somebody like come to the rescue basically and be like, okay, here's what we're going to do. Instead of flying in to Cozumel, you're going to fly into Cancun, and we're going to get you a ticket for a ferry that's going to take you to Cozumel, and someone's going to be meeting you there at the Cancun airport, and her name is Maria, and she's going to take you to the ferry with your bags, and we're going to make sure that you get there. You guys are customers. And it was like, at the moment, it was like the greatest customer service
Feeling like
experience.
a VIP.
I was like, this is amazing. We worked this out. This is so cool. And we get to go on a ferry ride for free, basically. Well, we landed in Cancun, and there was no Maria at all. And we were like, what do we do? What do we do? We're like on the wrong, I mean, Cozumel is an island off of Mexico. We're on the mainland, and we're in a place where we don't speak Spanish at all. We're like, what do we do? So we like had to like get our bags, and we had to like walk through the town with our bags. I was still wearing like a sweatshirt. We were so sweaty on this cobblestone to try to find this ferry. We were like, this is what the ferry's called, and we're talking to people and they don't understand us. And it was so stinking stressful. I remember like I didn't pay for an international cell plan, but I was trying to get data about what we're supposed to do. So I had to turn on my networking, and it was like ended up being like a $250 cell phone bill for that couple hours or whatever. It was like and we finally got there, but like we were so stressed from the day that we just didn't want to do anything. We just like crashed. But I just remember like Maria's there to save us.
Yeah.
There's no Maria.
No Maria.
No.
Where
Maria.
are you, girl?
Yes. And so that was like such a stressful thing. And honestly, it was, I just remember like walking through the streets of Cancun with our bags looking like tourists in a place that they weren't speaking the language we speak. We looked different than everybody else, and I felt like really exposed. It was kind of scary in that way, looking back on it. But that was by far the worst. And the rest of the trip was great, but that was how it started. Yeah.
Well, and ours was the opposite. So we took a 20-year anniversary trip to the Turks and Caicos. We've never done anything like this, to an all-inclusive kind of resort. And the flight there was amazing. The shuttle picks us up, takes us to our resort. The week is fantastic. The weather was 85 degrees and breezy, like every single day. Amazing. On the return flight home, plane takes off at normal time. We think we are good to go. About 10 minutes into the flight, they turn us around and land us back at the Turks and Caicos airport because there was some issue with the plane, which thank you so much, Mr. Pilot. Like, I'm okay with that because I don't want to crash, you know? So we get back to the airport and they tell us that they're going to get things fixed. We're going to be able to take off that night. Like, we're still good to go, you know? And we had a connecting flight in Miami to Indianapolis, you know, like all this stuff that we're trying to figure out and make sure it's going to work. And so we had to even come up with like a new connection and that kind of stuff because we knew we were going to miss it. And anyways, that flight does not take off. Our plane did not leave that night at all. They and we're talking about an airport that is not your typical American airport. Okay, there's no Starbucks, there's no restaurants, there's literally nothing in this airport. And you have all these passengers that are hangry at this point and, you know, stressed. And so it was not good, but they we couldn't go back to the resort that we had left, and so they put us up in a hotel. And then this is kind of tail end COVID kind of stuff, and so we had gotten COVID tests cleared at the resort before we went to the airport. They were telling us we had to get new COVID tests and we had to pay for them and we had to find a place to get them even taken. Yeah, it was a whole thing. So we finally fly into Miami like 2 days later. Jeez. And obviously missed all of our connection stuff, had to get new ones back to Indy. But when we get to Miami, the airline puts us in a hotel that then had bugs on the floor. So we're like, it was just a whole series of unfortunate events. And, you know, 3 days later, we were back home and people are like, oh, you got an extra 3 days of vacation. I'm like, no, I need another vacation to recover from these 3 days that were so stressful. And we just kept trying to remind ourselves, like, not to take away from these amazing week we had because the end was so tragic.
I would much rather have drama on the front end of a trip than the back end of the trip. So I win this battle of the suffering.
You really did. Because that was not great. But
man, it's terrible.
So my experience, it was a road trip and not a plane flight. But a couple years ago, my family had booked this like Airbnb up in Michigan, and it was up in the woods near the dunes, and it was gonna be so much fun. And so my husband and I were driving up. As soon as we get into Michigan, we hit the biggest pothole I've ever seen in my life.
Swallowed your car.
Yeah, basically swallowed my car, and there was an airbag in the seat that went off. And so all I hear is this loud boom, smell the airbag smoke. Oh my gosh. And I'm like, what happened?
We're on fire.
Yeah. And so Lucas pulls off to the side. And so we had to figure out how to get up to Michigan or get up to where they were the rest of the way on just the spare tire. But it totaled my car. Yeah. And so it was just an awful experience and something that was so stressful. The drive ended up taking so much longer because of this. But it was a traumatizing experience. It was not fun.
And you can't blame anybody for it because it was just the state of Michigan and the road system, basically, right? Yeah.
And there's awful jokes all the time about how terrible the roads are in Michigan. And so it's very ironic that it happened as soon as we got into Michigan. Oh my gosh.
Welcome to Michigan.
I've never had an airbag go off.
Yeah, I haven't either. It's probably pretty scary.
Like, what's...
Yeah, I mean, it's dust, and it's got, like, this very distinct smell. I've been in a couple of car accidents, so I've smelled it before. And so, like, when it went off, I was like, where did this airbag go off? Because I'm looking in the front. I didn't realize that there were airbags in the seat. Oh, my gosh. Yeah, but it was a stressful experience.
That's super stressful.
Our second topic today is a street article titled "Woman Praised for Saying No to a Mom with Kids on a Plane." Over the last year, debate over whether it's okay to ask or in some cases demand a stranger to switch plane seats with you has heated up, as most major airlines have now made seat pre-selection a perk for higher traveler classes. Many families with kids are increasingly left separated on busy flights. The situation once again came to a head when a jewelry company CEO posted a TikTok video describing how she refused to switch seats with a mother of two on a Delta Airlines flight. Tammy Nelson, who founded the Ohio-based jewelry brand Conquering, was going on a business trip to California when she entered the plane and saw a woman sitting in the window seat written on her ticket. "What would you do?" Nelson asked her 270,000 followers in a caption posted over a video of herself in the plane. "I got on the plane and a woman was sitting in my seat, and when I mentioned it to her, she said, 'Oh, you want to sit here? I thought we could switch because these are my kids.'" She pointed to the 2 seats next to mine. Nelson reportedly told the woman that she is happy to switch as long as it's another window seat, but refused to do so for the middle one the woman had because she gets motion sickness and specifically paid for the window seat to help with it. The mother ultimately returned to her seat, but according to Nelson, was super annoyed. Many commenters applauded Nelson for standing her ground and not giving up the seat that she had booked. So what do you think? Do you think it was selfish of her to not switch seats, or what do you think of the situation?
Well, first, as somebody who has flown with 2 little kids quite a bit over the last couple of years, it's a terrible situation. And to take a step back from her decision, I mean, the airlines have got to figure this stuff out. Like, the responsibility for this system really lies on the system that was created with paying extra for seats. Yeah. And honestly, like, it makes no sense when you have to pay for like a toddler seat, but it's not guaranteed they're going to be with you.
Yeah.
It makes no sense. And it creates this situation to where people have to make these decisions. And I think it leads into more selfishness and all this kind of fight.
But I will say I did a little more research, and her kids are 11 and 15. So it's not like she was leaving a couple of toddlers in seats sitting. Like, these are middle school kids for the most part, so I'm like,
that is different.
They can sit in a seat not directly next to you, and her seat was in the row right behind them, so she could still see them. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so for me, that kind of changed. Yeah, that kind of changed my perspective a little bit when I heard that, because, like you, I'm like, okay, if these are 2 toddlers, I'm probably going to be like, sure, you can have this seat. I mean, I would never guilt or shame her for staying in her seat because she paid for it. She paid extra because she gets motion sick. Like, that is what it is, And if you want to sit together, then the system's broke, but it is the system that we're working with, but yeah, to know that this lady's kids were older, I was like, no, like, I'm just going to sit here, the seat I paid for, and you can sit right behind them and watch them. But that's just me. I never want to assume that someone else is going to accommodate me. Like, that is just a sense of entitlement that I'm not okay with, and, but that's just me. What would you have done, Abby?
I hate confrontation, so I probably
you would have got up and gone.
I'd be like, "Yeah, but
I'll just sit in the bathroom the whole flight. I'll just sit in there. That little.
Is there room in the cockpit for me? This lady wants my seat.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but no, if it were toddlers, I probably would have definitely given it up because I don't want to babysit their kids the whole flight.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah.
So I don't know. It's just a hard situation because I'm the same way where I prefer to have the window because I can get motion sickness during a flight. And I don't know. It's a hard situation, like I said, and I don't like confrontation.
I mean, I feel like it's okay for people to ask, but there can't be this assumption that, like,
right,
they're always going to accommodate you. Like, that's not real life.
Mm-hmm. But I agree, like, airlines should have some type of feature and not just assume that everyone's traveling just adults, Yeah, I don't mind if I'm not sitting right next to my siblings or my husband on the plane, but if it's my baby,
right, it'd be different.
That makes it an uncomfortable situation.
You're like, "Hi, stranger. Here's my 2-year-old. Good luck. I'm gonna be back in the back with my headphones in." Like, that's not how that works. What would you have done, Joel?
What I would have probably realistically done is that I would have said okay, and then I would have complained about it. Yeah. Passive aggressively is what I probably would have done, realistically. But it's really got my wheels turning, in like the idea, okay, but if I'm a follower of Jesus, how would a follower of Jesus respond in this situation, right? And so on Sundays for the last month, if you're going back on our church podcast, it'll be a long time ago, but it was the month of July. We did a series called Reactions Speak Louder Than Words. And in the series, we talked about how we overreact often, but Jesus practiced this really like mischievous and beautiful art of what we call the over-underreaction, to where he would underreact to when he was treated poorly or when there was a bad circumstance put in front of him. He would underreact so much that people would like, the what? The what? And like do a little stop and stare, like, what's your deal? What's wrong with you? And as I was just reading this, I'm like, oh man, I wonder what Jesus would do. What would an over underreaction? What would it look like to trust God so much and not put myself front and center so much that people would be like, dang, like, what's up with him? He paid for that seat and he's saying it doesn't matter, you know? And so it just got me thinking in that, like, to respond, to react Christianly in a Christian way. I would hope that I would use this as an opportunity to show like, hey, I don't have to do this. And maybe something in the way I react and respond would point you to, wow, there's something different about that, because that's not normal, not natural, because I could show you the receipt and I could, do the whole fight. And so I start to think like, just for me, what I would ideally want to portray in that, what kind of story in that moment could you tell that would be remarkable and be amazing? And I thought, oh, that would definitely be like, of course, if that's what you want, that's fine. I'm still going to get there. I still have my iPad with the movies, the show I'm going to watch. Like, it's all right. I'm flying in a tube in the air. You know what I mean? Like, this is amazing. I would want to lean more into that. But like I said, realistically, my first response would be like, oh yeah, sure, I should do this. And then I would complain to my wife about it and tell the story and complain forever about it.
Yeah.
That's how I would naturally probably do it.
Well, last week, me and Lucas and his parents, we went to the circus in Peru, and they have assigned seatings, and we got to our seats and there was people sitting in our seats, and I had this like panic moment because when we went and booked our seats, pretty much the whole place was filled. So I'm like, if we sit over here, now we're in someone else's seat. Yeah. What do we do? And so like it was just this stressful moment. But yeah, I feel like, leaning into that over-under reaction and finding a way, okay, well, you're in my seat. I'll go sit over here at the end where I know that there's no tickets, but we just kind of like awkwardly stood there for a second until we're like, hey, you guys are in our seats. And they're like, well, this guy's in our seat.
And typically that's probably what it probably was, right?
Series of unfortunate events. Yep. It's hard.
Yeah. Well, that's it for this episode of Atypical Talk. If you have any questions or comments or topics you'd like us to talk about, you can email those to atypicaltalkpod@gmail.com. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Atypical Talk Pod, and make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform to get updates when new episodes are uploaded. We hope that these conversations today have helped you think wider, love deeper, and partner with God to bring the up there down here in your everyday life. Thanks for listening.